What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla stock, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to break down what the news is saying about Tesla, what data is dropping for tomorrow for the whole market that's going to affect Tesla, and what's happening with all these different technicals from Tesla to SPY to Nvda, the QQQ, and many other tickers. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, and it's tomorrow, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market and Tesla. So when it comes to Tesla, we had a very sideways day because the CPI data that came out was quite mixed. Some of the metrics were hotter than expected, but others were as expected. And the good thing about the data would be the fact that most articles were saying that the Fed would likely not change its policy like way too much. There would not be too many altercations because of it. And the market was happy about that. Had the media said something like, oh, CPI is too hot, the Fed may have to raise rates again, that could have caused the market to sink, but that was not the case for today, as many analysts were saying that the Fed would likely not hike more because of that data alone. So that's part of why the market held up. And the numbers were actually not that horrible if you just look at them carefully. Just real quick, basically, a core CPI month over month was a tiny bit hot at 0.3% versus the 0.2% forecast. Just a tiny bit hotter than what the expectation was, but very, very close. Month over month inflation was as expected at 0.6%. The overall inflation year over year was 3.7%. That was a tiny bit harder than expected. We were expecting 3.6%. So super close, just a teeny bit hot. That's why the market wasn't that phased by this. And then core was 4.3%, which is very close to expectations. So it wasn't really that bad. Just as a reminder for tomorrow, we have more data dropping. We have the PPI reports coming out. That's going to be almost as significant as CPI alongside with initial jobless claims. They're going to cause some very interesting pieces of price action. Now, CPI was not that crazy today. It wasn't really that impactful because once again, it was just aligning with expectations and the market was quite indecisive, just trading sideways. So with that said, right, it wasn't that impactful. With that new standard that was set, I would say that PPI and even initial jobless claims together could be just as impactful, if not more impactful, depending on what we get for tomorrow. So an hour before the market opens, PPI is coming out. That's just like CPI, except it's inflation for the producer side. PPI stands for the producer price index. It's going to give us more information about how inflation is looking for producers and manufacturers. Now, this tends to be a leading indicator for CPI. So if this is hot, it's going to give us information about how CPI may be hot during the next report. And if it's cool, it's going to be pretty decent for the future. That's why PPI is going to be very important. Then we have initial jobless claims. This affects the Fed's policies. We want this to be as expected. So for PPI year over year, we want it to be about 1.3%. And then for core PPI, we want it to be about 2.3% right over here for tomorrow. If it's way too low, the market could like that. If it's as expected, the market will like it. If it's hotter than expected by some margin, that's going to be bad for the market. Watch that very carefully. For initial jobless claims, you want this to be between 221 to 225,000. If it's way too low, that's going to be not so good for the markets because the Fed will be incentivized to be hawkish. If it is as expected, the market's going to like that. So watch all of this carefully. Now, what's going to be more impactful? Like I said before, whichever one is more significant. So whichever one is like a bigger beat, whichever one is much further from expectations could have a bigger effect. So watch this all very carefully. It's all coming out an hour before the market opens, and I will be talking about this tomorrow morning. But remember, this is what's going to impact Tesla in the market. That's going to have a bigger effect. And I can't really predict exactly what the numbers will look like, but I will talk about the ranges for the markets in just a couple of minutes and what is very probable to happen despite that. Just give me a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about some more data for Tesla. The Model Y inventory levels are starting to drop a little bit. They're still kind of flat, still a little bit hot actually, but it's not that bad. Besides that, everything else is very close to the normal levels of the year, which is a good sign for Tesla as demand is starting to kick in again. This was because of some price cuts Tesla announced, and that is still looking quite good. We have some good news and also some decent news that came out. I mean, I would say this news is kind of mixed, but Tesla is one of the most shorted stocks on the overall stock exchanges. And Elon Musk has said that he suspects that Bill Gates is still shorting Tesla. I find this quite comical. I think it said right over here, this is what Musk quoted. He said that to the best of his knowledge, Bill Gates still has that massive bet against Tesla on the table. Someone should ask him if he still does, right? So he basically says that he is still very suspicious of Gates, and the list goes on for what on earth is truly going on. However, I don't really want to point any fingers and say it's 100% confirmed. We don't truly know this. Elon Musk just suspects it. That's going to be very important to just consider. Now, the truth is, regardless of Bill Gates, Tesla is a heavily shorted stock. There are also shorts piling into it, and we don't know what this will cause. It could always lead to a short squeeze in the future, or it could cause some downside. I'm always going to be open minded nonetheless. Now, we have some good news that came out. India is once again drafting some new policy changes to push for EV investments. This is what their trade minister is saying, and that's some good news because, once again, there are a lot of regulations and policies in India which are making things harder for Tesla, according to Elon Musk. And as they're once again pushing to incentivize EV investments and developments, that is going to work in Tesla's favor as time goes on. Because of the fact that, according to the same minister, he stated that Tesla is going to likely be outsourcing and not just doing so, it's going to double its components to do so. So they're going to be doubling their investments to about $1.9 billion this year alone to improve infrastructure, to buy more parts, to work on facilities and to do things like that. That is bullish news for the long term. Very, very excited about that. There's also this news that came out about the Cybertruck. This is looking quite interesting because we typically see one or two Cybertruck at a time in pictures and videos. And now this picture came out as we can see a fleet of Cybertrucks being delivered and moved around by some cargo. So that's very, very awesome. Very, very exciting to have witnessed. We're starting to see more progress, and I'm very excited for what the future is going to hold for this as more and more buyers are going to step in for these vehicles. Now, for the people interested in AI stocks, I just want to mention that ARM has an IPO tomorrow. It's going to have a very high valuation. So if you're interested in playing this or buying it, the opportunity comes out for tomorrow. This is a massive, or I would say relatively large chip design company compared to other companies. It's primarily owned by SoftBank, but there are going to be some shares traded for the public. As far as Tesla goes, volume was a little bit low, 111 million. It was just trading sideways for the majority of the day, not really doing anything. But the short volume did go up just a little bit. We saw about 62% of the price relative to short volume go up. That tells us that there's a little bit more shorting on Tesla than before. Adding on to this, RBC Capital has reiterated that Tesla should outperform the market. They just said this 2 days ago, which is still a pretty good sign. They're still confident that Tesla can outperform the market. Price-price ratio is going up as Tesla has some strength. It's still holding up nicely. Thursdays tend to be green about 48% of the time, so it's not the strongest of days, but this is going to be more impacted by the data coming out for tomorrow. And finally, for the short interest, we saw another increase. We saw about 42.5 million Tesla shares shorted just 2 days ago. That's important because more shorts are continuing to pile in. We're starting to see these rectangles get taller and taller, and more shorts have a reason to do so. Maybe they do. Maybe it leads to downside. Maybe it leads to a short squeeze. We'll have to wait and see. So can I predict what's going to happen tomorrow, guys? I honestly can't really give you guys the best of predictions because it depends on the data. I want to be honest and fair and simple with everyone. It depends on the data. If we get some very, very hot inflationary numbers and we end up getting some not so good looking jobs numbers, this could slow the market down. Okay, or the exact opposite could happen. The market could still rally. But we have some very mixed signals, and there is a possible head and shoulders on Tesla. There's just no confirmation of this breaking down just yet. So I just want to be very open-minded to anything just to be safe. But we have something that's bullish and bearish for the markets. I'm going to talk about what that is. So what's good for the markets, what's bullish for the bulls would be the fact that on the VIX, we have this gap down here, and we're starting to fill this gap. As the VIX continues to drop, it is looking weaker as we broke some critical support around 13.6. And the VIX is looking weaker, so if the VIX does drop, there could be a pop coming for the market potentially pushing. However, I have some not so good news for the bulls, and that's the fact that Apple stock is looking weaker. If you look at Apple, I was calling out this head and shoulders earlier. I told you all there's a head and shoulders on Apple, and it continued to sink today, looking relatively weak. This head and shoulders is still valid. Now, could this be like a cup and handle that's inverted, that's forming where we have like the cup, a little handle forms when we retest the 20 EMA and then we start sinking? Or could this just be, more bearish nonetheless? And in my opinion, I think we're bearish overall on Apple. Either we get a little pop tomorrow, depending on the data, then we start continuing to drop over the next few days, or it just drops from here. This head and shoulders is very clean. It looks quite valid to me. And it looks like we're going to see downside on Apple, which could slow the market down. So it's kind of mixed. We have SPY, SPX, and these other ETFs and etc. all holding up quite nicely. The indices as well, they're trying to hold up, but Apple is slowing them down. Very, very mixed stuff. The market is trading sideways. So, what are some important levels to watch for? Now, I'm sorry, guys, I can't truly give you guys the most accurate prediction, but I can tell you what I think is more probable to happen. We've been range bound for quite a while, so there's a high probability the market's going to remain range bound. Now, for SPY, we may get a pop in the morning. That's what my gut tells me looking at the VIX. We may slow down, just trade sideways after that, and I think we're just going to trade sideways once again. Now, 444 is critical support. If we break below 444, we're going to sink to 442. If we manage to bounce off that and just continue to range trade, 448 to 447.5 are some critical resistance zones. If we get above 447.5, watch 448, then potentially 448.75. We could start pushing into the higher levels if we get above 447.5. I think we're going to likely see a pop, then a drop as time goes on tomorrow. That's my prediction. But like I said before, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know what the inflationary numbers and et cetera are going to be, so I can't truly give you a very highly convicted prediction. Now, could there be a head and shoulders on Tesla? There's a risk of that as the PPO is losing some momentum, but we're always open-minded depending on the data. Good numbers, right? If we get low inflationary numbers tomorrow and we get a decent unemployment looking piece of data, we're likely going to see the market, okay, try to pop a little bit. This could push Tesla once again in the morning towards this like 275 area or so. Then it could slow down and then just continue to trade sideways. If we hold above 272.5, we could push for 275 or higher. If we break down, let's just say we get bad numbers, you have to watch 268 and 266 on Tesla. 266 specifically is the 20 EMA, or very close to that. If that breaks, I could see Tesla sinking towards 260 and we could see some more downside. Now, we also have this gap down here, so be very careful with Tesla. This gap does exist. There's a possible head and shoulders developing, but I'm not going to make any promises about any patterns. The data matters the most. What I like to do is just wait for the data, be patient. Sometimes when you trade, you have to say that. I know it's not what everyone wants to hear, but life is all about patience. We have to wait and see what the data tells us, and that's going to determine what happens to the market, especially by the time we open tomorrow. But I just want to tell you all that Tesla looks like it's going to remain range bound, in whichever direction it breaks in is going to determine the bigger move. If you want Tesla to go all the way up to like 280 plus, we have to hold above 275, for example. And if you want to be a big bear on Tesla, you need to see it break below 266. So far, it's just going back and forth, trading sideways. But just be open-minded as we have some big numbers coming out. Like I said before, Apple looks weak. It could retest like 175 and then try to reject, but overall, I do see it eventually coming down to about 171. It just looks more bearish to me. Could rebound first, then end up dropping, or it could just continue to drop as soon as tomorrow. It looks more bearish, so be very, very open-minded to that, potentially acting as an anchor for the markets. It doesn't mean the market has to turn red. It just means that Apple could slow it down a bit if it's trying to push. For the QQQ, if you're bullish, you want to see it break and hold above 375.5-ish and then push for 377.5. If you're bearish, you want to see it break below, well, specifically it's around like this 370 area. If it breaks below that, it's going to start sinking into the 365 zone. It looks like it's just trading sideways, not really doing anything. Once again, just very, very boring. So in my opinion, it may just continue to range trade, hit like 375 and just trade sideways. That's what it's looking like. Nvidia looks like it has a change in market structure. There could be a possible inverse head and shoulders developing, but we need to see it hold above 452. If it holds above the 200 EMA, continues to range trade, we could see some life in it. Now we have the IPOs for tomorrow for the chip stocks. It looks like Nvidia is getting some attention. So is AMD. So there's a possibility Nvidia is going to retest. If Nvidia breaks 458, we could see it push for 462, then trade sideways after that and just remain range bound, kind of like this level right here when it was like trading sideways for the last few days. We could see Nvidia do something like that on this side. On the right side, to be forming an inverse head and shoulders, but I'm not too fixated on that. I'm just going to be watching its ranges. If it breaks below 452, that could be a bearish signal. We could see Nvidia start to sink and come all the way back down to 448 or below that. So watch those levels carefully, see how we open depending on the data. And as of right now, Nvidia is showing some strength. We have a green day, a potential change in market structure. So the odds do favor 462 being tested, but just to be safe, we want to watch our data. Microsoft looks more bullish, got a nice little potential bullish cross in the PPO. The data will affect how it moves, but from a technical standpoint, we could see it retrace a bit and try pushing for 338. AMD looks pretty good too. It's testing the 200 EMA as resistance last time I checked. Watch 108 as resistance. If it breaks this, 110 is a real possibility. But right now, it looks like it may just trade kind of sideways. I mean, there could be like an inverse head and shoulders on it, so I could see it pushing for 111 thanks to the new IPO, but we have to see it break 108 first. 108 is going to be the very important resistance. For Netflix, this is looking a little weak, but it's quite oversold right now. We're approaching this critical support right here around this 405 area, so I could see it drop a little bit more than bounce, or it should make an attempt to bounce soon. It's just getting ready to base. So if it doesn't bounce off 410, it should try to bounce around 405 and then go from there and try to push back to like 420. For now, just wait and see if that happens. The VIX is looking weaker if it does come down to fill the gap. This could be because of the market potentially making an attempt to bounce, which could happen in the morning tomorrow. Looking at the data, we'll have to wait and see. Just I like to be open-minded nonetheless. The dollar is trading flat, it's not really doing anything. This is not really giving us much information just yet. It's not really affecting the market that badly or anything. We'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow by the time all this data comes out. Until then, I'm just going to be patient. Google looks a little bit more bullish than bearish. We have a nice potential uptrend coming with a nice cross on the PPO. It could retest 137 then bounce. If it holds above 137, we're going to be looking for a push to 138.25, potentially even higher levels than that. But it is looking a little bit more in favor of the bulls, making higher highs and higher lows. Amazon looks a little bit more bullish too, continuing to break out. Uh, Overall, we could see a back test of like 144 before it bounces and pushes for 146.5. It does look more bullish to me, so keep that in the back of your mind. Meta looks very, very sideways. It's been continuing to just go back and forth, getting very tight. Could retest 303, then just trade sideways around 305 for tomorrow. We'll see what the reaction is. I can't really predict exactly how it's going to open. We'll see what the numbers tell us. And with that said, guys, please be very, very careful. So Tesla looks like it may hold up for the time being. There is a risk of a possible head and shoulders developing, but we need to see Tesla break below 266 for us to turn really bearish, for us to get that confirmation. There's a possibility of it, but I'm going to wait for the numbers before making any calls, so we'll see what happens tomorrow morning. I know you don't want to hear that, but like I said, guys, it's all part of life. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, an hour before the market opens. We have to wait for the data to give us those clues. With that said, have a great day. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you guys in the next video tomorrow morning. I'll see you guys in the morning for the next video. Do what you have to do, and peace out.